In this video, I show you how to paint geometric art using watercolors. For those of you who are new here, hi, my name is Muhammad and I am an engineer and artist from Egypt. I specialize in geometric art, particularly the Islamic geometric patterns. I've been taught the traditional way, which means the way I explain and teach you how to draw these geometric patterns is the same way that has been inherited throughout the generations, dating back over 1,000 years ago. So I usually paint in acrylics. For those of you who follow me on Instagram or on YouTube, will see that most of my paintings and my artwork is actually using acrylic paint, which is my preferred method. However, I also paint in watercolors from time to time, and I'll show you in this video how I use two brushes at a time to achieve good results with watercolors. For me, the two biggest challenges with watercolors are, first one is the hard edges. So watercolor is very tricky to paint a hard edge with watercolors, especially if you're a beginner. And the second would be the consistency of the paint throughout the shape. So those of you who paint in watercolors would know the challenges when it comes to, the flowers or the cauliflowers, when you add water to the paint, and, when you have a relatively dry paint on the paper, on the surface, and then you add water or add a more diluted paint to it, it will cause problems. So we don't want any of these. We want any of these problems. We want a consistent result across our painting. So the first step would be, I'll again make sure I fix my painting to the drawing board or the drawing surface through some of the masking tape. And I've tried my best to make sure, the lines show in the video. Please refer to the previous videos if you're unsure how we've arrived at this point, where I explained everything in detail, and I continue to do so in this video. Basically, the lines here are actually visible enough for me to paint on, but still a bit faint, so that they don't show through the final painting. Just, in case we choose not to have, those darkened lines in the final painting. So again, I'll finish fixing my drawing sheet to the drawing board. And my first step is actually from last time, if you have any lines that need darkening, you could darken them now. But what I'll do is actually draw the outside envelope, and what that helps me to do is, let me zoom out a bit to show you the step. What this will help me do is actually just, it's the square around the painting itself. And that will help me cut the painting to the right size at the end. So this is just a quick step before delving into the painting process. And this will also help me set a boundary for the outer shapes in the painting. Okay, now I've got this square on the painting or around the painting. So let's get started. In the previous video, we've discussed how to or which colors we're gonna be working with. So we'll start with a cerulean blue color here, and what I'll try to do is show a bit of my palette, although I'm not gonna be able to show all of it in the video, but let's see. Actually, I prefer to show you the painting zoomed in a bit, a bit more, so that you could see exactly this technique, because it's quite important It's very important that you get this right. Okay, so let's get started. So I start with, I'm using two brushes actually. One zero brush or 000, or you know, the finest brush you could get away with, or you could handle, and another round brush. Both of them are synthetic, so I wouldn't recommend using natural hair brushes or anything. Synthetic is fine. You know, no need to be cruel to the animals. And yeah, so I start with also getting a pipette and getting some drops of water, clear water from my water jar. I use two jars, one for cleaning the brushes and one for the clean water. So I keep one clean and I use the other one just to rinse and clean my brushes from time to time. And with this clear water, I just place it on my paint pans here on my palette and start activating this paint to get the consistency that I'm after. So let me see if I can get this in shot here. Yeah. So here I go. I'm going with the cerulean blue. And to be honest, I'm not bothered to clean my palette. I might actually use this paint. So as you can see, I'm loading the brush from the paint pan and into the well where I keep, you know, the paint, and I try to mix enough paint. So I think we set our minds to painting a number of these shapes. So what I'll try is to get more water here in my pipette and place it in the pan again to get more and more paint here. Always try to mix enough paint so that you don't end up it's very tricky to mix watercolors achieving the same hue or same color. So always make sure that you have enough, more than enough as well, I would say. Okay, if you notice, it's a bit darker in the camera or the video today, but I did that deliberately to show the construction lines. So what I'll do is, with my round brush, I'll start painting the shape without trying to paint onto the lines. But what I'll do is I'll make sure my paintbrush is always loaded with more paint, and there is like a generous amount of water, and there's always that kind of, they call it the watercolor bead, which means that there is water and there is paint inside the shape. Okay. And with watercolors, so I'm happy with this, but I'll just dab in more paint. And you have to work quick if you are in a dry environment. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll pick my narrow brush or fine brush, the zero brush, and I'll start, as you can see, taking some of this painting that I've already had and take it to the edges. And with this brush, it allows me to actually get these sharp results. Okay, and in this way I get to actually achieve hard edges and, you know, probably some of the best results I could achieve in watercolors for hard edges. If you feel that, you know, you've actually run out of paint, you could always go and get more from, you know, your palette. And that's why, you know, my first recommendation was to mix more than enough so that you never run out of the same mix of colors. Okay. And you can see that the paper started to buckle a bit, which is fine. That's okay, but this will affect your results as well. So try to use the thickest paper you could find, really. I'm using, I think, 260 GSM, but I would usually use 300. So you can see that some of the paint is actually, you know, now started to dry out, which is good. That's not a problem. I think here I haven't. Yeah, so I just try with my narrow brush to make sure that the hard edge is maintained and it's covered with enough paint, and that's it. So once I do that, I don't touch this. I let it dry, completely dry out. So I rinse my brush, dry it out, of course, and put it aside. But I make sure that, you know, this part of the painting isn't touched until it completely dry out. So otherwise it affects the results. If you see now that, you know, there are some extra paint and darker areas concentrated on the sides, what you could do is with a dry brush, you could start, you know, absorbing some of this paint and drying it on, you know, a piece of paper towel. So you can see I've just started lifting some of this paint to make sure that I achieve a consistent result, that's all. So to make sure that my paint is consistent, and I try to not leave brush marks in my painting. So this is the blue part, or the very first shape that we are painting here. So onto the others around it. I wouldn't paint around it until this is completely dry, as I said. So what I'll do is I'll probably paint the ones on the top and the sides. So I'll start with the one here on the top. And for that, again, I'll load my pipette with water. I will try to activate my darker blue. And let's see. Yeah, this is quite dark. So what I'll do is I'll add more water to it on the palette. And I'll start again, as you can see from the last step that we made. I will make sure that my brush is always loaded and that I leave enough paint and water onto the paper. Okay, and then I go with my zero brush, and I start, you know, spreading that paint around onto the edge. Okay. You could always rotate, you know, your painting around if you like. So, you know, just to make it easier for you, achieving those lines. Okay. And I can see there are parts that, you know, need more paint, so I spread that paint around again very carefully, because I don't want to be coming out of this shape. And yeah, that's one. I'll do the two corners as well. So again, with my brush, my round brush, and gotta be careful and move my jars next to the palette. Okay. So quickly go in with the zero brush and paint along these lines, spreading my reservoir of paint and water mix here. Okay. And here's my top shape. Now onto the other corner. Again, I'll try my best to stay away from, the damp areas. So I don't want to be affecting or, ruining any paint. I'll not touch anything until it's completely dry. And just leave it out there to dry out. Okay, and that's okay. Now onto the other corners. So I'll do this part. It needs more paint. I can see it needs more paint. So I mix more paint onto the palette. The outer edges are not important, you see, so because they're gonna be either cut or actually hidden by the frame mount, so I don't mind. I don't need to pay much attention to them. The inner ones are the important ones. So you can see I'm taking my time with those and just making sure that I get them as accurate as possible. And you'd need to practice, of course, a lot to get the most accurate results, but it's okay for it to be not as accurate as you'd think, because you're painting by hand. So I'll probably speed up this part of the video and continue the video when they're dry. Again, here's another corner. And just turn it around to make sure that we get this right. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll turn this around. Remember, if you feel like there is an area that you know, is drying out to be lighter, you could always go over it again when it's completely dry. Okay. On to the next part. Again with the same. With my round brush, I load these areas with the paint. Okay, let me try these. I could barely see the line here, which is good. Okay. Yeah, you can see I tried to work in short but direct strokes in order to achieve the most consistent and the best results, really. So let me drag some of this paint over here. And again, I try to make the brush move from, you know, from the elbow, not from the wrist, because oh, I've ruined the painting already. I've put my hand on some of the paint, which is okay. I'll fix that later. And over to this part. Okay. I'll do this one. Or let me do this corner first. You can see where I, you know, place my finger here, and I'll fix that later. Okay. And now again, just take this. Okay. And I'll just pause the video and continue once this is complete. This is dry.